I was walking through a crowded downtown street when I saw a woman that made my blood run cold. For a moment, I completely froze. My heart started pounding. The noise of the city seemed to disappear. Thousands of people were moving around me, but I couldn't take my eyes off her. No, that wasn't possible. It couldn't be her. I stood there staring as she casually waited for the traffic light to change, completely unaware that my entire world had just been turned upside down. I wanted to believe I was mistaken. I wanted to believe she was just someone who looked similar. But the closer I looked, the harder it became to lie to myself. The same dark hair. The same smile. The same way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I knew that face better than my own. Because 3 years ago, I stood beside a coffin and said goodbye to that woman forever. 3 years ago, everyone told me she was dead. 3 years ago, I buried my wife. Yet somehow, she was standing 20 feet away from me, alive. My name is Ethan. And that was the moment my life stopped making sense. I didn't sleep that night. I sat alone in my apartment staring at Sophia's photographs, trying to convince myself that what I had seen wasn't real. The problem was, I knew Sophia better than anyone. You don't spend years loving someone without memorizing every detail about them. The way they smile. The way they walk. The little habits nobody else notices. And the woman I saw today had all of them. Which made absolutely no sense. Because 3 years ago I lost Sophia. Back then life was simple. I wasn't rich. I wasn't successful. But I was happy. Sophia had a way of making even ordinary days feel special. We talked about everything. We planned vacations we couldn't afford. We argued about stupid things and laughed about them an hour later. I genuinely believed we would grow old together. Then one rainy evening, everything changed. I was making dinner when someone knocked on my front door. 2 police officers were standing outside. I still remember the look on their faces. The moment I saw them, I knew something was wrong. They told me Sophia's car had gone over a bridge during a storm. The river current was too strong. Rescue teams couldn't reach the vehicle in time. For weeks, search crews looked for her. For weeks, I refused to believe she was gone. Every phone call made my heart race. Every unknown number gave me hope. I kept waiting for someone to tell me there had been a mistake. Nobody ever did. Eventually, the search ended. The memorial service followed. Because there was no body, the casket remained closed. I remember standing there staring at it, feeling like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. After that, everything changed. I stopped caring about work. I stopped answering calls from friends. I stopped taking care of myself. People told me grief gets easier with time. For me, it didn't. I wasn't living. I was surviving. And for 3 years, I convinced myself that was enough. Until today. Until a crowded street. Until a familiar face. Until the impossible happened. Because no matter how many times I replayed that moment in my head, I kept reaching the same conclusion. The woman I saw wasn't someone who looked like Sophia. It was Sophia. That thought refused to leave my mind. For the next 3 days, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing on that street corner. Every time I tried to convince myself I was mistaken, I remembered the look on her face. The way she moved. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear. It was her. By the 4th day, I stopped asking myself whether I was crazy. Instead, I started looking for answers. Every afternoon after work, I returned to the exact place where I had seen her. I walked the same streets, visited the same stores, and sat on the same benches for hours. Most days I found nothing, just strangers rushing through their lives while mine remained frozen. Then I noticed a small coffee shop near the intersection. An idea suddenly came to me. The shop had security cameras facing the street. At first, the manager refused to help me, but after listening to my story and seeing the desperation in my face, he eventually agreed to let me review footage from the day I saw her. My hands were shaking as I watched the recordings. Hours passed. Then suddenly, there she was. I froze. Sophia. Clear as day. Alive. Walking down the sidewalk. Healthy. Uninjured. Not a single scar. Not a single sign that she had survived a terrible accident. She looked happier than I remembered. Then I noticed something else. A ring. A ring I had never seen before. My stomach tightened. I replayed the footage again and again, hoping I had missed something. I hadn't. The woman in the video was Sophia. And somehow she had been living her life while I spent 3 years mourning her. After that, I became obsessed. Using the footage, I slowly pieced together her routine. I tracked the places she visited and the times she appeared. Every clue led to another. Every answer created more questions. Finally, one evening, I followed her car out of the city. The drive lasted nearly 40 minutes. When she eventually stopped, I found myself staring at a beautiful suburban neighborhood filled with large homes, perfectly maintained lawns, and quiet streets. Sophia pulled into the driveway of a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine. I parked across the street and waited. A few minutes later, she stepped outside carrying a tray of drinks. Then something happened that shattered whatever hope I still had left. She laughed. Not the forced smile people use when they're pretending to be okay. A real laugh. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard in years. Several people were sitting on the porch with her. They looked comfortable around her, familiar, like they had known her for a long time. As I watched from inside my car, a terrible realization slowly settled over me. Sophia wasn't hiding. Sophia wasn't struggling. Sophia wasn't trying to survive. She was living a completely new life. And from the look on her face, she seemed perfectly happy without me. For 3 years, I had been trapped in the ruins of our old life. Meanwhile, she had already built another one. I spent the entire night sitting inside my car across from that house. Part of me wanted to drive away and never come back. Another part needed answers. By morning, I had made my decision. I wasn't leaving until I spoke to her. The next evening, I parked down the street again and waited. Hours passed before I finally saw her walk out of the house carrying a few grocery bags. She was alone. My heart immediately started racing. This was it. I stepped out of the car and started walking toward her. At first, she didn't notice me. Then our eyes met. The reaction on her face wasn't confusion. It wasn't surprise. It was pure terror. The grocery bags slipped from her hands and crashed onto the driveway. For several seconds, neither of us moved. I felt like I couldn't breathe. 3 years of grief, questions, and sleepless nights stood between us. Sophia, I whispered. She took a step backward, as if she had seen a ghost. The irony almost made me laugh. I was the one who thought she was dead. What is this? I asked. How are you here? She immediately looked away. Leave. Her voice was cold. So cold that I almost didn't recognize it. Leave before I call the police. The words hit me harder than I expected. 3 years. 3 years of crying for her. 3 years of loving her. And the first thing she said was a threat. I shook my head. No. She looked angry now. Nervous. Cornered. I didn't care. I deserved answers. You don't get to do this, I said, my voice breaking. You don't get to disappear for 3 years and then pretend I'm the problem. She remained silent. I could see her hands trembling. For the first time, I realized something was very wrong. Not because she was alive, but because she wasn't acting like someone who had survived a tragedy. She was acting like someone who had been caught. And as I stood there staring at the woman I had mourned for 3 years, a terrible feeling settled into my chest. Whatever explanation she was about to give me, I wasn't going to like it. For nearly a minute, neither of us spoke. Sophia kept staring at the ground while I stood there waiting for answers. Finally, she took a deep breath and looked at me. What happened next was worse than anything I had imagined during the last 3 years. I wasn't in an accident, she said quietly. The words hit me like a truck. My mind immediately rejected them. There had to be another explanation. Maybe she was being threatened. Maybe someone had forced her to disappear. Maybe there was a reason behind all of this. But then she continued speaking. She told me the accident had been planned. She told me she had spent months preparing to disappear. New documents, new accounts, a new place to live. Every detail had been carefully arranged before she vanished. While I had spent 3 years mourning her, she had spent those same years living a completely different life. I could barely breathe. Why was the only word I managed to say. Sophia looked away again. Then she gave me an answer that hurt more than any lie ever could. She told me she had fallen out of love with me long before she disappeared. She said she felt trapped. She wanted a different life, different experiences, different people. According to her, divorce would have been messy and painful. She believed disappearing completely would be easier for everyone. Easier? I almost laughed when she said that. For 3 years, I had blamed myself for not protecting her. For 3 years, I had cried myself to sleep thinking about all the things I should have said before she died. For 3 years, I had loved a woman who wasn't dead at all. And to her, it was simply easier. As I stood there staring at her, something inside me broke. Not my heart. That had already broken years ago. This was something deeper. The version of Sophia I had carried in my memories died right there in that driveway. The woman standing in front of me wasn't the person I had spent 3 years grieving. She was someone I didn't recognize at all. And for the first time since seeing her alive, I wished she had never come back into my life. And for the first time since seeing her alive, I wished she had never come back into my life. I don't remember much about the drive home. One moment I was standing in Sophia's driveway listening to her destroy 3 years of memories. The next, I was sitting alone in my apartment staring at a wall. Hours passed without me moving. The strange thing was that I wasn't crying. When Sophia supposedly died, I cried for weeks. I cried at the funeral. I cried when I saw her clothes hanging in the closet. I cried whenever I heard our favorite songs. This felt different. Back then, I had lost the woman I loved. Now I had lost the woman I thought she was. The more I replayed our conversation, the more painful it became. Every memory suddenly felt poisoned. Every anniversary, every vacation, every promise we made to each other. I couldn't stop asking myself the same question. How long had she been pretending? Had she stopped loving me a year before she disappeared? 2 years? Was she secretly planning her escape while I was planning our future? The answers didn't matter anymore, but my mind kept searching for them anyway. Sometime after midnight, I stood up and looked around the apartment. Everywhere I turned, I saw Sophia, photographs on the walls, pictures on shelves, framed memories that I had spent years protecting like sacred treasures. Suddenly, I couldn't stand looking at them anymore. I started taking them down, one after another. The wedding photos, the vacation pictures, the smiling faces that now felt like evidence of a lie. By sunrise, every reminder of her was packed into boxes sitting by the front door. Then I found the memorial album I had created after her death. 3 years of grief bound together in a single book. I opened it, read a few pages, then threw it into the trash. Because the woman I had mourned never existed. Not really. The Sophia I loved died the moment she decided to fake her death and watch me suffer. By morning, I was sitting alone on the floor of an empty living room. For the first time in years, there were no pictures of her staring back at me. Yet somehow, the apartment felt even emptier. I had spent 3 years believing I was a widower. Now I realized something much worse. I wasn't a man who had lost his wife. I was a man who had been abandoned by her. And somehow that hurt even more. The weeks that followed were some of the darkest of my life. I stopped answering phone calls. I ignored messages from friends. Most days I stayed inside my apartment staring at the ceiling for hours. The truth was that Sophia had managed to destroy me twice. The first time was when I believed she had died. The second time was when I discovered she had chosen to leave. At first I blamed her for everything. Then I blamed myself. I replayed our marriage over and over, searching for the moment I had failed her. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I wasn't exciting enough. Maybe there was something I could have done differently. But no matter how many times I went through those memories, the ending never changed. One morning, I woke up to a stack of unpaid bills on my kitchen table. My landlord had sent another warning. My boss had left 3 voicemails asking where I was. My bank account was shrinking faster than I wanted to admit. For years, I had put my life on hold because I thought I was grieving a tragedy. Now I realized I had been sacrificing my future for someone who had already moved on. That afternoon, I walked into my bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I barely recognized the man staring back at me. My eyes looked tired. My beard was overgrown. My shoulders were slumped as if I had been carrying the weight of the world. For a long time, I just stood there. Then a strange thought entered my mind. If Sophia could spend 3 years building a new life, why was I still living in the ruins of the old one? For the first time in months, I felt something other than sadness. I felt angry. Not the kind of anger that makes you break things. The kind that forces you to wake up. The kind that makes you realize you've been letting life happen to you instead of taking control of it. That day, I cleaned my apartment. I threw away the last reminders of the life I had been clinging to. I called my boss and apologized. I paid what bills I could. None of it magically fixed my problems, but it was a start. That evening, I stepped outside and sat on a bench near my apartment. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't thinking about Sophia. I was thinking about myself. And as I watched the city lights come alive around me, I made a promise. She had taken 3 years from me. She wasn't getting the rest of my life. The next morning I woke up before sunrise. For the first time in years I had a purpose. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't hope. It was simply a decision. I was tired of being the victim in my own story. The first few months were brutal. Movies make recovery look inspiring, but the truth is far uglier. I forced myself to go to work even when I didn't want to get out of bed. I dragged myself to the gym even when every part of me wanted to stay home. Some nights I would lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering why I was trying so hard when the person I loved had thrown me away so easily. But slowly things began to change. My performance at work improved. The projects I handled started getting noticed. People who had ignored me for years suddenly wanted my opinion. I began taking online business courses at night and spent weekends learning skills I should have learned years ago. While other people relaxed, I worked. Not because I was ambitious. Because I was angry. Every time I wanted to quit, I remembered Sophia sitting on that porch laughing. Every time I felt sorry for myself, I remembered her telling me that disappearing was easier than divorce. Instead of letting those memories destroy me, I turned them into fuel. Months became a year. Then another. The weight I had gained disappeared. My confidence returned. I started investing the extra money I earned. Most of my investments failed, but a few succeeded. Then one small business idea I had been working on after hours finally started gaining traction. For the first time in a long time, my future felt bigger than my past. One evening, after closing a deal that would have seemed impossible just a year earlier, I sat alone in my apartment and realized something strange. I hadn't thought about Sophia all day. Not once. The realization shocked me. For 3 years after her death, and another year after discovering the truth, she had occupied every corner of my mind. Now there were entire days where she simply didn't exist. And for the first time since that rainy evening when the police knocked on my door, I felt something I thought I had lost forever. Freedom. I didn't know it yet, but the life I was building was about to become far bigger than anything I had ever imagined. Over the next 2 years, I became completely focused on my work. The small business I had started on weekends slowly grew into something real. New clients arrived every month, profits increased, and opportunities that once felt impossible suddenly became part of my everyday life. For the first time in years, I felt proud of myself. More importantly, I felt at peace. Sophia still existed somewhere in the back of my mind, but she was no longer the center of my world. Then one evening, an old mutual friend called me out of the blue. We talked for a while about work and life before he hesitated and asked if I had heard anything about Sophia. The moment I heard her name, I expected the familiar pain to return. Surprisingly, it didn't. Curiosity was all I felt. That's when he told me that things weren't going well for her. Apparently, the people closest to her had eventually learned the truth about how she disappeared. Her family was furious. Friends she had made over the years had distanced themselves after discovering the lies she built her new life on. The relationship she had left me for was falling apart as well. Years earlier, hearing that news would have satisfied me. I might have even celebrated it. Instead, I simply listened in silence. When the call ended, I returned to my work without giving it much thought. That was when I realized something important. I no longer cared whether Sophia succeeded or failed. Her choices belonged to her. Her consequences belonged to her too. Later that night, as I looked out from my office window at the city lights below, I understood how much I had changed. There was a time when every decision I made revolved around her. Now my life was moving forward without her, and it felt natural. Somewhere out there, the perfect life Sophia had sacrificed everything to build was beginning to crack. Meanwhile, mine was finally coming together. What I didn't realize was that those cracks were only the beginning of something much bigger. The next few years passed faster than I ever thought possible. The company continued growing, and so did I. What started as a small side project eventually became my full-time focus. Then it became something larger. We hired employees, opened a bigger office, and expanded into markets I once thought were far beyond my reach. Every milestone felt unreal because there was a time when I could barely get out of bed in the morning. The best part wasn't the money. It was the confidence. For years, I had measured my worth through someone else's love. When Sophia left, I felt like I had lost my value as a person. Now I was learning something important. My value never depended on her. It never depended on anyone. It came from the person I chose to become when life gave me every reason to quit. As my business grew, so did my personal life. I rebuilt friendships I had neglected. I started traveling again. I laughed more, slept better. Some mornings I would wake up and realize I felt genuinely happy, not distracted, not temporarily excited, actually happy. One evening, after signing one of the biggest contracts in the company's history, I returned home and sat on my balcony overlooking the city. The skyline glowed beneath the setting sun, while messages of congratulations flooded my phone. For a moment, I simply sat there enjoying the peace. Then I realized something that made me smile. I couldn't remember the last time I thought about Sophia. Not because I was trying to forget her. Because I no longer needed to remember. The woman who once felt like the center of my universe had become a chapter in my past. An important chapter. A painful chapter. But still just a chapter. As I looked out over the city, I felt something I never thought I would experience again. Gratitude. Not for what happened, but for surviving it. Little did I know, while my life was reaching heights I had never imagined, Sophia's was about to completely fall apart. I didn't learn about it all at once. Pieces of the story reached me over several months. A mutual acquaintance mentioned that Sophia had moved out of her house. Another told me the man she had left me for was no longer in the picture. At first, I paid very little attention. Her life was her responsibility, just as mine was mine. But eventually, the full picture became impossible to ignore. The relationship she had sacrificed everything for had ended badly. The same man she believed would make her happier eventually walked away. Without family support and without many real friends left, she suddenly found herself alone. The people who once laughed with her on that porch were nowhere to be found. Then came the financial problems. The comfortable lifestyle she had built started collapsing piece by piece. Credit card debt piled up. Bills went unpaid. Savings disappeared faster than she expected. The life that once looked perfect from the outside turned out to be standing on a very weak foundation. One evening, I received a message from an old friend who had recently seen her. "She looks completely different," he wrote. That was all. No details. No explanations. Just those 4 words. For a moment, I found myself thinking about the woman I had seen laughing on that porch years ago. The woman who had told me disappearing was easier than divorce. Back then, she seemed so certain that she was making the right choice. Now, for the first time, I wondered if she was starting to question it herself. The strange thing was that I didn't feel happy about any of it. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel victorious. If anything, I felt nothing. Because the truth was simple. Sophia's downfall couldn't give me happiness. I had already found happiness on my own. And as I closed my laptop that night and prepared for another busy day, I had no idea that my past was about to come knocking on my door once again. A few weeks later, I was preparing for a meeting when my assistant walked into my office holding a letter. She told me it had been delivered by hand and specifically addressed to me. That alone was unusual. Almost nobody sent letters anymore. The moment I opened it, I recognized the handwriting. Sophia. For several seconds, I simply stared at the paper. 5 years earlier, I would have dropped everything to read a message from her. Now, I wasn't even sure if I wanted to open it. Eventually, curiosity won. The letter was several pages long. She congratulated me on my success and told me she had seen an interview I recently gave online. She said she was proud of what I had built. Then the letter shifted. She apologized. Not once. Not twice. Over and over again. She wrote about the mistakes she had made, the people she trusted, the opportunities she wasted. She admitted that the life she had chased never brought her the happiness she expected. Near the end of the letter, she confessed something that surprised me. She regretted leaving. Not just leaving me. Leaving the life we had built together. For a long moment, I sat in silence after finishing the final page. Years ago, those words would have meant everything to me. Now they felt strangely empty. Not because I hated her. Because I didn't. The anger was gone. The heartbreak was gone. Even the resentment had disappeared. All that remained was acceptance. I folded the letter, placed it back into the envelope, and set it on my desk. Then I returned to work. An hour later, my assistant informed me that someone was waiting downstairs in the lobby. I asked who it was. The answer immediately brought back memories I thought had been buried forever. Sophia. And for the first time since finding out she was alive, she wasn't hiding anymore. She was waiting for me. When I walked into the lobby, I almost didn't recognize her. The woman sitting on the couch looked nothing like the Sophia I had seen laughing on that porch years ago. Her clothes were simple. Her face looked tired. The confidence she once carried so effortlessly had disappeared. She looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in months. The moment she saw me, she stood up. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. It was strange. There was a time when seeing Sophia could make my entire day better. A single smile from her was enough to make every problem feel smaller. Now, standing only a few feet away from her, I felt nothing but calm. "Hi, Ethan," she said softly. I nodded. "Hi, Sophia." The conversation could not have been more different from the one I imagined years ago. Back then, if she had come back, I would have begged her to stay. I would have asked 1,000 questions. I would have done anything to keep her in my life. Now I simply waited. Eventually, tears began forming in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I said nothing. She started talking about the past, about our marriage, about the life we used to have. She told me she had made the biggest mistake of her life. She admitted that the freedom she chased never made her happy. The people she trusted disappeared when things became difficult. The life she thought she wanted had fallen apart piece by piece. Then she looked directly at me. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone. Years earlier, hearing those words would have shattered me. Now they simply sounded sad. Not because I didn't believe her. Because I did. For the first time, I believed she was telling the truth. But truth arrives too late sometimes. Sophia continued apologizing, hoping to find some trace of the man who once loved her more than anything. She talked about memories from our marriage and moments we shared together. The problem was that she was speaking to a version of me that no longer existed. Finally, I handed her a tissue and smiled politely. "The man you're apologizing to isn't here anymore." She stared at me in silence. "The man who would have done anything for you disappeared a long time ago." The tears began falling down her face. For the first time, she seemed to understand that this wasn't about anger. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about forgiveness. It was about time. And time had changed both of us. As she sat there crying in the lobby, I realized something. Sophia wasn't trying to get her husband back. She was trying to get her past back. And some things, once lost, can never be recovered. After that meeting, Sophia started appearing in my thoughts again, but not in the way she once had. I wasn't thinking about the woman I loved. I was thinking about the woman who had thrown everything away. A few weeks later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that things had gotten even worse for her. The small apartment she had been renting was barely affordable anymore. She had taken multiple jobs just to keep up with her bills. The friends she once spent weekends with were gone. Even some family members had stopped speaking to her. One evening, I received another message from her. This time it wasn't an apology. It wasn't a request. It was simply a photograph. An old picture of us standing on a beach during our first vacation together. No caption. No explanation. Just a memory. I stared at it for a few seconds before putting my phone away. The strange thing was that I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel angry either. I just felt distant. The memories still existed, but they no longer had power over me. Meanwhile, Sophia was being forced to live with hers every single day. For the first time, She understood what real loneliness felt like. Not the loneliness of being alone in a room, but the loneliness of realizing that the people who truly loved you are gone because of your own choices. As I sat on my balcony that night looking over the city lights, I felt grateful for something I never expected. Not for what happened, but for who I had become because of it. And while I was finally learning how to enjoy the life I had built, Sophia was learning a painful lesson. Regret doesn't hurt when you make a mistake. It hurts when you realize there is no way to undo it. A few months later, I was across town for a meeting with a potential client. The meeting ended earlier than expected, so I decided to stop for coffee before heading back to the office. It was a small place tucked between two buildings, nothing special, the kind of shop people walk past without noticing. I stepped inside and joined the short line. When it was finally my turn to order, the woman behind the counter turned around. My heart didn't stop. The world didn't freeze. But I did stare for a second. It was Sophia. She was wearing a stained apron with the coffee shop's logo on it. Her hair was tied back. Dark circles sat beneath her eyes. She looked exhausted. For a brief moment, panic flashed across her face. Then came embarrassment. Then shame. I realized she hadn't expected me to see her like this. Not after all the confidence she had when she walked away from our marriage. Not after all the dreams she chased. I simply smiled politely. "One black coffee, please." She nodded without saying much. The entire interaction lasted less than a minute. No dramatic speeches. No confrontation. Just a customer ordering coffee. As I sat near the window waiting for my drink, I watched her work. She dealt with impatient customers, cleaned tables, and apologized to people complaining about orders that weren't even her fault. The woman who once believed she deserved a better life than the one we shared now looked completely worn down by the life she had chosen. Yet the strangest part was how little satisfaction I felt. Years ago, I might have enjoyed seeing her like this. Now I didn't. All I felt was sadness. Not for myself. For her. Because for the first time, I could see that Sophia wasn't just struggling. She was drowning. And before I left that coffee shop, I was about to learn just how deep the water really was. As I sat by the window, I overheard part of a conversation between Sophia and her manager. I wasn't trying to listen, but their voices carried across the nearly empty shop. The manager wasn't happy. He was demanding payment for something. Sophia kept apologizing and asking for more time. Her voice was shaking. Eventually the manager walked away, clearly frustrated, leaving her standing there with tears in her eyes. A few minutes later, my coffee was ready. When Sophia brought it over, she tried to smile, but I could see right through it. "You okay?" I asked. For a second she looked surprised. Then she laughed softly. Not because anything was funny. Because she was tired. "Not really," she admitted. That was all she said. But it was enough. After she walked away, I made a few phone calls. One led to another. Within an hour, I knew more than I expected. The debts were real. Medical bills from a family member. Credit card debt. Missed rent payments. Collection agencies. She wasn't struggling. She was one bad month away from losing everything. Years ago, I would have seen this as justice. Now it just felt sad. Before leaving, I pulled out my checkbook. I wrote a number that would clear every debt she had and still leave enough money for her to start over. Then I folded the check and placed it inside an envelope. As I walked toward the door, I stopped beside the counter and slid it toward her. She looked confused. "What's this?" "Open it later," I said. Her eyes followed me as I headed for the exit. "Ethan." I turned around. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I gave her a small smile. I hope things get better for you, Sophia. And with that, I walked out of the coffee shop. I didn't know that she was about to open the envelope. And I definitely didn't know she was about to come running after me. I took a slow breath and turned around. Sophia was standing a few feet away from me, clutching the envelope with both hands. Her eyes were red from crying, and for a moment she looked completely lost. "Why?" she asked. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "After everything I did to you, why would you help me?" I looked at her and thought about all the different answers I could give. I could have reminded her of the nights I spent grieving. I could have talked about the years she stole from me. I could have listed every painful memory she left behind. Instead, I simply said, "Because that's who I am." The moment those words left my mouth, she broke down. Not because of the money. Not because her debts would finally disappear. It was because she finally understood what she had lost. Years ago, she walked away believing she could find something better. She thought happiness was waiting somewhere else. Now she was standing in front of the same man she had abandoned, watching him show her more kindness than anyone else had in years. The realization hit her all at once. After a few moments, she finally managed to calm herself down. "Ethan," she said, wiping tears from her face, "if I could go back and change everything, I would." For the first time, I believed her completely. There was no manipulation left in her voice, no excuses, no lies, just regret, real regret, the kind that comes when you finally understand the cost of your choices. Then she asked the question I already knew was coming. She looked directly into my eyes and said, "Can we start over?" For a few seconds I didn't answer. I simply looked at her. Years ago, hearing those words would have meant everything to me. I would have dropped to my knees and thanked God for a second chance. But that version of me no longer existed. The man standing here today had survived heartbreak, loneliness, failure, and years of rebuilding. He had become someone completely different, and as I looked at Sophia, I realized there was no anger left inside me, no hatred, no desire for revenge. There was only peace. I already knew what my answer was going to be. Sophia stood there waiting, her eyes filled with hope and fear at the same time. Years ago, I would have done anything for a second chance with her. Back then, she was my future. She was the person I imagined growing old with. But life had a strange way of changing people. The pain she caused had nearly destroyed me, yet it had also forced me to become someone stronger. Somewhere along the way, while I was rebuilding my life, I stopped waiting for her. I took a deep breath and smiled sadly. "No, Sophia." The words were gentle, but they were final. For a moment she just stared at me as if she hadn't expected that answer. "I forgive you," I continued. "I truly do. I don't hate you anymore. I don't wake up angry. I don't spend my nights thinking about what happened. But forgiveness isn't the same thing as love." Tears filled her eyes again as she listened. "The truth is," I said, "I loved you more than anyone I've ever loved. When I thought you died, a part of me died too. But when I found out you were alive, I eventually realized something important. The woman I loved only exists in my memories now. She's gone, and I've spent too many years trying to hold on to someone who doesn't exist anymore." Sophia lowered her head. I could see the heartbreak on her face, but this was a pain neither of us could avoid. Some doors close forever, not because people are cruel, but because life keeps moving forward. After a long silence, she whispered, "I understand." I wasn't sure if she really did, but it was enough. I gave her one final smile, turned around, and walked toward my car. This time she didn't call my name. This time she didn't ask me to stay. And for the first time since all of this began, neither of us tried to stop the other from leaving. As I drove away, I looked ahead instead of in the rearview mirror. Some people spend their entire lives trapped by their past. I almost became one of them. But now, for the first time in years, I wasn't driving away from something. I was driving toward my future.